Welcome to this video on Marbury versus Madison, 1803, one of the most pivotal historical trials in American law. The case of Marbury versus Madison was heard by the Supreme Court of the District of Columbia between 1801 and 1803. The action was a petition for a writ of mandamus, demanding the delivery of a judicial commission. William Marbury and other midnight appointees sued James Madison, the new Secretary of State. They demanded the court force Madison to deliver their judicial commissions. Initially, this was a procedural fight about paperwork and political power. President Adams signed the judicial commissions on his last night in office, and Secretary of State John Marshall sealed them. Some commissions, including Marbury's, were not delivered, and President Jefferson ordered Madison not to deliver them. Marbury then filed an action to compel Madison. A writ of mandamus is an order from a higher court compelling the performance of a mandatory official duty. It is a legal remedy often used when an official abuses discretion by failing to act as required by law. Marbury filed a petition seeking this writ. The Supreme Court heard the case as an original action, needing to determine its authority to issue the writ. This procedural fight ultimately laid the foundation for judicial review. The case raised several constitutional questions. Did Marbury have a legal right to the commission? Did the law provide a remedy? Was a writ of mandamus the correct remedy? And critically, could the Supreme Court issue the writ? The court confirmed that since the appointments were signed and sealed before Adams left office, the legal appointment process was completed. Marbury had a legal right to his commission, and the undelivered status did not void the appointment. This scene highlights Marbury's arguments as presented to the Supreme Court. This scene illustrates the eventual outcome of the case, the establishment of judicial review. Marbury argued he had a legal right to his commission, guaranteed by the completed appointment process. He asserted that a writ of mandamus was the correct legal remedy, and the court must compel Secretary Madison to deliver the commission. Marbury's theory of the case rested on the idea that delivery of the commission was a mandatory official duty. Madison's refusal was illegal, and the court had the power to compel an official to perform their duty. As a witness, William Marbury confirmed that President Adams signed his official judicial commission as Justice of the Peace. The missing commission prompted him to file the suit. A key question was whether the commission delivery was a, quote, political question. The court needed to determine the limits of its authority and carefully avoid direct confrontation with the executive branch. Marbury's arguments were a persuasive blueprint for judicial remedy. He asserted that refusing to enforce the commission would nullify lawful acts of Congress and betray the separation of powers. Marbury contended he had a vested legal right to the commission once it was signed and sealed. He argued that the execution of the appointment was a matter of law, not discretion, and could not be retroactively invalidated. Marbury invoked Section 13 of the Judiciary Act of 1789, which granted the Supreme Court original jurisdiction to issue writs of mandamus against executive officers who refuse a mandated duty. He argued that the Constitution's Appointments Clause and the Judiciary Act imposed a mandatory duty on the Secretary of State to deliver the commission. Madison was illegally withholding a required document. This scene depicts the counter-arguments presented by James Madison, the Secretary of State. Madison argued that physical delivery was essential for the commission's validity, and he had the right to withhold undelivered commissions. He also contended the dispute was a political question, and that the Supreme Court lacked original jurisdiction. Madison's counter-arguments centered on the legal invalidity of the commission without physical delivery. He maintained that the court lacked the proper original jurisdiction for issuing the writ of mandamus. Madison's theory held that the appointment process was incomplete without delivery. Therefore, the new administration had the right to withhold the commissions, considering the matter a political question for the executive branch. Madison's key arguments included: delivery was required for a valid commission, the new administration could legally withhold the commissions, it was a political question, and the Supreme Court lacked original jurisdiction. Madison argued that the writ of mandamus was not the proper remedy because the Supreme Court lacked original jurisdiction. He claimed the Judiciary Act of 1789 unconstitutionally expanded the court's power, requiring the case's dismissal. Chief Justice John Marshall had to resolve the complex legal issues presented in the case. Marbury warned that refusing to enforce the commission would void lawful acts of Congress, destroying the separation of powers. He urged the court to enforce the commission to preserve the Constitution. The court focused on the remedy. Did the law provide one? And was mandamus correct? Most importantly, could the Supreme Court constitutionally issue the writ to the official? The eventual rulings in Marbury v. Madison, 1803, would have profound implications for the American legal system. The case established the doctrine of judicial review. The Supreme Court gained the power to declare laws unconstitutional, ensuring the Constitution is the supreme law, and federal courts are its final interpreters. In Part 1 of the holding, Chief Justice Marshall ruled that Marbury had a legal right to his commission, and the law provided a remedy. He confirmed that mandamus would be the correct legal remedy, and the court could order delivery. However, in Part 2, Marshall held that the Judiciary Act of 1789 unconstitutionally expanded the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction by granting it the power to issue writs of mandamus. Therefore, the court lacked jurisdiction to issue the writ to Madison. The court ruled the Judiciary Act unconstitutional because its expansion of original jurisdiction to allow the writ of mandamus conflicted with Article 3 of the Constitution, which limits the Supreme Court's original jurisdiction. The conflict between the Judiciary Act's expansion of original jurisdiction and the limits set by Article 3 led Chief Justice Marshall to rule the Judiciary Act of 1789 unconstitutional. Judicial review was established. The Constitution is the supreme law. All legislative acts must comply, and courts must decide which law governs in a conflict. The Supreme Court now has the ultimate power of judicial review. Judicial review confirms the Constitution as the ultimate supreme law of the land. Federal courts must decide conflicts, ensuring all legislative acts comply with the Constitution. Marshall's strategy was brilliant. He established the enormous power of judicial review for the Supreme Court, the ability to declare any law unconstitutional, while avoiding confrontation with the executive branch by sacrificing a small case. Thank you for watching this video on the historical trial of Marbury v. Madison.